Previously on Ngozi's story, Ngozi grew up to become a beautiful lady, but when her suitors saw her, they ran away in terror. She bursted into tears because the same thing happened after all the prayers that she, her father and friends had made on her behalf. She narrated the whole incident to her father. He consoled her, saying, "Everything would be all right, my daughter. Hand over this battle to God. He won't fail us." Ngozi was consoled by her father's words. The following day, she went to the forest and waited for Dennis, but he didn't show up, so she decided to go back to her joyful self before Dennis came into her life, as she didn't want to force things or feel sorry for herself. She decided to hand over everything to God, just as her father had advised. It wasn't easy, but she knew it was the best thing to do so as not to lose her sanity. Dennis returned to the city, his heart filled with regret for running away and leaving Ngozi behind. He had fallen deeply in love with her, but what he saw scared him. He kept pondering on it and decided to pray and ask for God's direction. After praying, he saw a trance where he was given a diamond, but he refused and picked gravel instead. By the time he realized what he was doing, the diamond disappeared. He came back to reality and was confused, so he asked God to speak to him by his word in Proverbs 10 verse 22. The scripture was, "The blessings of the Lord maketh rich, and addeth no sorrow." Then he heard God clearly asking him what the meaning of the name Ngozi was. He said, "Blessing." And God told him that if he didn't want to miss out on his blessings, he should marry her and forget about the veil, that it was programmed to destroy her marital destiny. Also, he shouldn't be afraid but only trust in him, because he only gives sorrowless blessings. He was overjoyed to hear from God for himself, because that ended his confusion and gave him peace of mind. With that, he went to rings and more jewelry shop to get Ngozi a beautiful diamond ring befitting for her. He got the perfect ring and was set to go and see her the following day. He arrived at the village early in the morning and was already in the forest to wait for Ngozi, because they used to meet in the afternoon. He waited for hours and she didn't show up, so he became worried, wondering if she had stopped coming because of what happened the last time they saw each other. He didn't know where she lived, and he couldn't remember the name of her church. He felt really bad, but he encouraged himself in the Lord, because he knew Oluwa was involved. He waited till evening, and finally at 5:30 p.m. she came. He was so happy and grateful that she came. She was surprised and happy to see him, and was also wondering why he came back, because her other suitors never did. Dennis went on his knees and apologized to her for leaving her and not reaching out to her. He asked her to forgive him. Ngozi told him that she had already forgiven him before he came back. She told Dennis that she practices advanced forgiveness so that nothing will hinder her prayers. Dennis couldn't hold back his emotions, so he confessed to her how much he loves her and how he had missed her. With that, he brought out the diamond ring and popped the question, "Will you marry me, please?" Ngozi was shocked. She didn't know what to say. Dennis was begging her not to say no. When she was able to gather her thoughts and listen to her spirit, she gave him a yes. He was so excited that he lifted her up and spun her around. Ngozi was excited and couldn't believe her eyes. The rock on her finger was so beautiful. She kept asking herself if she was dreaming, because 1 minute she was single and the next she was engaged, and everything happened so fast. Dennis told her to inform her father that he was coming back in 2 weeks, but he had to go to the city to sort out some things, but he will be back with his kinsman to see her father. Ngozi couldn't believe her ears. They spent some time together, then they bid each other goodbye. She went back home and shared the good news with her father, and also showed him the ring. Immediately, Pastor Okoro burst into a praise worship session, thanking God for answering his name in their lives and putting their mockers to shame. She joined her father, and they praised God together. She couldn't believe that what she waited for had come to pass. She also shared the news with her best friends, and they were so happy for her that their prayers had been answered with a loud evidence. They all waited anticipating when Dennis would come back for them to start planning the wedding. Dennis returned to the village, his heart filled with so much love and joy. He and his kinsman went to Ngozi's father and asked for her hand in marriage. Her father was pleased and accepted the proposal with his whole heart. He gave them his blessings and the wedding plans were set in motion. The wedding was a grand affair, with the whole village in attendance. Pastor Okoro was happy that he was finally joining his daughter in marriage to her own husband after so many years of joining people's daughters and sons. He was overjoyed to a point he started crying and asked Dennis to promise to always love his daughter and never hurt her. Ngozi was moved to tears when she saw her father crying, and she tried to console him. Dennis assured him that he won't regret handing over his daughter to him and that he would love her till the second coming of our Lord Jesus. Some people were happy for her, while others whispered and pointed, saying she had used charms to snag a handsome and wealthy husband. But she didn't let their words bother her because she knew they were envious of her, because God had shown her mercy by settling her with the best. She knew she had found her true love, and that was all that mattered. As they exchanged their vows, Ngozi's father beamed with pride. He had always wanted the best for his daughter, and now she was getting the happily ever after she deserved. But Ngozi's stepmother was not happy. She was jealous of Ngozi's good fortune, and she couldn't bear the thought of her stepdaughter marrying a handsome and wealthy man who was also godly. Another reason was that her daughters had run away from their husbands' houses after cheating on them and making them broke. She was now the one people were mocking and laughing at. People started gossiping that maybe Pastor Okoro was not their real father because they didn't seem anything like him. As the wedding reception came to a close, Dennis took Ngozi's hand and led her to his car. They drove off into the sunset, leaving the village and its gossip behind. Ngozi thanked God for hearing her daily cries and prayers. She had prayed for a husband who would love her for who she was, and now she had found him. As they drove to the city, she felt a sense of freedom and happiness she had never known before. She was finally leaving the village and its negativity behind, and she was starting a new life with the man sent from God. A year into their marriage, Ngozi discovered she was pregnant. They were overjoyed, and her husband was by her side every step of the way. He pampered her, cared for her, and loved her even more. Finally, the day arrived, and Ngozi was rushed to the hospital. Dennis was beside her with worry and excitement as the doctor and nurses assisted her in delivering the children. She had brought forth a set of twin boys. But the doctor wasn't finished. "There's one more," he said with a smile. "Ngozi, you have another baby in your womb. Please push." And with one final push, she delivered a beautiful baby girl. As she held her daughter in her arms, the doctor noticed that something else was trying to come out, so he thought it was another child, but instead a black polythene bag came out. They found it strange, but they pulled it out anyway. Immediately that was done, and they were done cleaning her up. Dennis noticed that her face started changing in his eyes, and he was no longer seeing the ugly, evil and scary-looking face that he used to see and had gotten used to. It had suddenly disappeared as soon as the nylon bag came out, and she looked younger and much more beautiful. He didn't want to tell her yet, so he waited for them to get home. When they were discharged and finally back home, she noticed that after they had settled in, her husband kept looking at her lovingly and would sometimes smile at her. She was wondering why, and she decided to ask him, and he told her that he was so happy and wanted her to rest well before telling her, but since she had asked, he narrated the strange thing he noticed when the nylon bag came out at the hospital. Ngozi said she was scared and had never heard it happen to anyone before, and that she felt weird, as if something had left her body, and she felt lighter and free. They praised God and thanked God for the safe delivery of the children and for restoring her beauty. Pastor Okoro got the news of the birth of his grandchildren from Dennis. He was so happy to hear that both mother and children were doing well, and that he was the latest grandpa in town. He told his son-in-law that he was planning to visit them soon because he couldn't wait to see them. He called Adaku and shared the good news with her, and immediately she heard this, she suddenly screamed, "No, no, no." She was in pain and said there was an invisible force flogging her. Her husband could not understand what she was saying until she started confessing to her evil deeds. By this time, people had gathered because she was acting mad. She had sought the help of a wicked witch to curse Ngozi, so that she would have an evil veil on her face which will make her look ugly and scary to any man that declares interest in marrying her. If she eventually manages to be loved by a man that would marry her, the curse will still not be broken except she gives birth and she, Adaku, dies. But now she had realized the gravity of her mistakes and begged for forgiveness. After her confession, she became crazy and ran into the road without looking, so she got knocked down by an oncoming vehicle and died at the spot. Her husband was disappointed and heartbroken that Adaku could be so wicked to have made Ngozi go through the hell she went through. He was also sad that he had lost another wife, but also overjoyed at the news that Ngozi had been set free and had given birth to triplets. So he decided to visit his daughter in the city, accompanied by her friends. As they arrived at the mansion, they were greeted by security guards who ushered them in upon hearing that they were Ngozi's family. As they entered the compound, they saw a beautiful woman sitting outside, surrounded by her children. Ngozi's father's eyes widened in amazement as he struggled to recognize his own daughter because she looked younger and more beautiful. He approached her and greeted her with a warm embrace. "Ngozi, my daughter, I can't believe it's you," he exclaimed. "You're even more beautiful than I remembered." Her friends were so happy to see her and noticed that what her father was saying was true. She had become much more beautiful. They were so happy for her and teased her about how she was chopping her husband's money and still maintaining beauty. Ngozi laughed heartily at their compliments. She was so excited that they made time to see her. As they entered the mansion, they were struck by the opulence and wealth that surrounded them. The cars, the furniture, and the artwork all testified to Dennis' success. But what struck them most was the love and warmth that filled the home. Ngozi's father and her friends were amazed by the way Dennis treated her like a queen. As they sat down to eat, her father told them about Adaku's confession and how she met her end. They were shocked to hear that she was the one behind her ordeal all those years. She narrated what happened at the hospital and what her husband told her. They were also surprised to hear such a strange encounter, but they were happy and thanked God that it was all over, and that she was back to her original self. Her father and her friends played with the children and took care of them. Her friends later returned to their individual homes, but her father stayed back. He prayed for his grandchildren and blessed them. After he had spent a week with them, Pastor Okoro prayed for them and turned to Dennis and said, "Thank you for loving my daughter. You are a true blessing to our family." Dennis smiled, his eyes shining with tears, and said, "Ngozi is a blessing to me, and I promise to always love and cherish her and our children forever and always." Ngozi took her love for singing to another level. With the love and support of her husband, she became a renowned gospel artist whose voice and songs brought healing, hope, deliverance and restoration to the sick, wounded, oppressed, depressed, dejected, hurt and abandoned. She used her testimony to win souls for Christ and told people about how Jesus saved her and turned her whole life around. Dennis' love for Ngozi only grew stronger with each passing day. He showered her with gifts and surprises, wanting to make up for the pain and suffering she had endured. He bought her an estate in her name, a symbol of his love and commitment to her. The estate was a grand mansion with sprawling gardens and a private lake. Ngozi was overwhelmed with emotion as she walked through its doors, feeling like a queen in her new home. But he didn't stop there. He also bought her a shopping complex where she could indulge in her love of fashion and entrepreneurship. And to top it all, he got her a fleet of cars, each one more luxurious than the last. She was speechless, her heart full of gratitude and love for her husband. She thanked him for his kindness and generosity, for seeing her worth and beauty when no other suitor would. As they settled into their new life, Dennis continued to love and cherish his family. He was a devoted husband and father, always putting their needs before his own. And he never forgot to thank God for the gift he had given him, a wife like Ngozi, who had brought light and love into his life. One day, as they sat on their porch, watching the sunset, Denise turned to Ngozi and said, "You know, I never thought I'd find a love like ours. You're my everything, my reason for living." Ngozi smiled, her eyes shining with tears, and replied, "I feel the same way, my love. You've given me a new lease on life, and I promise to always love and cherish you, no matter what." And so, their love story came full circle, a tale of redemption and the power of God and that of true love. Things you should take away from this story are: 1. Jesus is the only one that can turn your ridicule to a miracle. Don't give up on God. He will surely answer you. 2. True love sees beyond physical beauty and loves the soul, just as Christ's love for us, which is not due to looks or good deeds. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button for more awesome stories. See you in the next one.